Few paintings have become such a powerful emblem of a nation's history as Washington crossing the Delaware. As an iconic symbol of patriotism, it has secured a prominent place in countless history textbooks. Yet, its fame as a monument to the American Revolution has obscured its original purpose as an inspiration for people in Europe rather than America. Depicted is the prelude to Washington's encounter with the enemy at the Battle of Trenton, a turning point during the American War of Independence. The army had suffered one defeat after another when Washington's plan for a sneak attack was developed. On Christmas night, 1776, Washington piled nearly 2,500 soldiers, artillery, and some horses into boats and rowed across the Delaware River to the New Jersey shore, arriving in the middle of the night. Immediately, Washington marched his troops the remaining miles to the enemy encampment, taking the opponent by surprise and securing a much-needed victory. However, the painting of this decisive river crossing was not created in the direct aftermath of the battle, but 75 years later, in 1851. It was not even painted on American soil, but in Europe, by the artist Emmanuel Leutze. Raised in Philadelphia, Leutze moved back to Germany in 1840 to study at the famous Art Academy of Düsseldorf. The idea for the painting came to him during the time of the Revolution of 1848, the springtime of nations, with uprisings all across Europe. Rather than simply depicting a scene from the Independence War, he hoped his art would inspire European revolutionaries with the example of the successful American fight for freedom. To illustrate this fight, Leutze relied on the tradition of heroic history painting, placing the hero at the center of the composition. Here stands George Washington, firmly on a boat, gazing towards the New Jersey shore and awaits the impending battle. He is dressed in his Continental Army uniform, with a tricorn hat, boots, and a red-lined cape. In his hand, he holds a brass telescope, symbolizing his visionary leadership. His uncovered saber further suggests his role as a powerful warrior in the fight against Britain. His slightly older appearance reveals that this is not merely the George Washington as a general from 1776. Instead, it depicts Washington as the legend and first president of the United States, a status that, despite his important victory at Trenton, was not yet foreseeable at the time. To paint Washington as accurately as possible, Leutze used a cast from the face of the Houdon statue. As a result, Washington's features appear somewhat older, as the life mask was made nearly 10 years after the battle. Additionally, Leutze had access to a replica of one of Washington's uniforms, but it was not the one worn in 1776, but was made for Washington in 1789. But before we delve into the historical inaccuracies in this painting, let's focus on what we actually see. Leutze adapted a classical format for the composition, featuring an arrangement that culminates in a triangular grouping, with the flagstaff forming the apex above the figure of Washington. The composition begins on the horizontal base of the boat. From the left, our gaze is directed by the oar, and from the right, by the rays of sunlight and the soldier at the rear. The sky appears thick, with clouds, and is darker on the right-hand side. However, as we move to the left side of the sky, slivers of sunlight pierce through the thickness and emphasize the central figure of Washington and the man, highlighting their faces and the glimmer of the artillery in the background. The people are clad in dull, muttered colors, except for accents of bright red. Leutze unifies the composition by overlapping figures and repeating various shades of blue throughout the painting. All the lines in the picture convey a sense of motion in terms of the direction the men are moving. Washington, on the other hand, is the only vertical upright element, thus highlighting through geometrical interplay the special role of his character. Let's take a closer look at the other people in the boat. There's liveliness all around the center figure. The man right next to Washington, holding the flag, is the future 5th President of the United States, James Monroe. At the time of the crossing, he was a lieutenant at the Continental Army. During the Battle of Trenton, Monroe suffered a severed artery and nearly died. In the aftermath, Washington cited Monroe for his bravery and promoted him to captain. Washington, Monroe, and the flag form the central eye-catching features of the painting. The rest of the people represent diverse cultures and states, united in one boat for one cause. At the front of the boat is a recent Scottish immigrant, still wearing his Balmoral bonnet. The man sitting next to him appears to be of African descent. He wears a short tarpaulin jacket, typical of a New England seaman. Leutze's inclusion of an African-American man was not an accident. As a committed abolitionist, Leutze aimed to highlight the role of black men in the fight for freedom. Historically, when George Washington first arrived in Cambridge in 1775, as the newly appointed commander-in-chief, he resisted the presence of African American men in the army. Initially he tolerated their presence, but later banned their enlistment. Over time, as Washington was in constant need of more troops, he approved the active recruitment of black men into the army. You will often read and hear in popular media that this person is supposed to be Prince Whipple, a soldier and bodyguard to General William Whipple of New Hampshire. However, it is highly unlikely that Whipple was portrayed here. He was not famous at the time the painting was commissioned, and it is improbable that Leutze would have heard of him. The boatman pictured in the stern wears native moccasins, leggings, and a shoulder pouch, likely representing an indigenous member of the Continental Army. However, most Native Americans supported and joined the British forces during the war, in hopes that the British would uphold the Proclamation of 1763, which prevented the American colonists from moving west of the Appalachian Mountains. Huddled in the back of the boat are farmers from Pennsylvania and New Jersey, dressed in blanket coats and broad-brimmed hats. One carries a countryman's double-barreled shotgun. Another looks very ill, his head swathed in a bandage. It is possible that there is supposed to be a hidden man between these three people, suggested only by the weapon that is visible and seemingly belongs to none of the others. This would make sense, as it would bring the total number of passengers in the boat to 13, representing the 13 colonies. It is obvious that such a diverse group of people was not actually part of the crossing of the Delaware. There is even a person on the boat with an androgynous appearance in a loose red shirt, possibly a woman in man's clothing. This collection of individuals suggests the inclusive nature of the colonial cause in the American Revolutionary War. However, we must remember that this painting was started during the Revolution of 1848, and one of the major questions during that time was the potential unity of the many smaller German states into one nation. The different people in the boat can be interpreted as representing various cultures united for a common cause, a message clearly directed to the fragmented German territories. Although Leutze aimed for historical accuracy and used even American models due to its idealistic purpose and the need for an inspiring artistic expression, it is no wonder that the painting contains numerous anachronisms and mistakes. The flag on the boat wasn't used in 1776 when the crossing took place. It was adopted around a year later. At the time, the Grand Union flag served as the standard of the Continental Army. Washington's actual boats were substantially larger than those portrayed. Instead, Durham boats, which are flat-bottomed and double-ended, were used. Additionally, flat ferries probably fixed to a wire strung across the river were employed. Leutze modeled the Delaware after Germany's Rhine River. Ice on this section of the river usually forms in large flat sheets, not in the chunks pictured in the painting that are indeed more common for the Rhine. The lighting is also incorrect for the time of the day. The crossing began in the very late afternoon and continued until about 4 a.m. Darkness covered Washington's advance to Trenton. Leutze's dawn, on the other hand, promises a new day and a bright future for the new nation. But all these inaccuracies don't really matter, and criticizing Leutze for them would do the artist an injustice. His painting lives through its symbolism, and he could hardly provide inspiration with a dark but realistic portrayal. It was meant to highlight the achievements of the Americans, to inspire a revolution in Germany. Thankfully, we don't have to imagine a more accurate version of Leutze's Washington Crossing the Delaware, because it already exists. Painter Mort Künstler, known for his rigorously accurate historical paintings, made Washington's Crossing his subject in 2011. His dedicated goal was to rectify the many of the inaccuracies of Leutze's original. But in this way, of course, it has lost its patriotic appeal. Leutze's hopes for the revolution of 1848 were disappointed. By the time he finished the painting, most of the revolutionaries' ambitions were shattered, and the attempted unification of Germany had failed. The first version of the painting from 1850 was damaged by a fire in his studio. After it was restored, it remained in the Art Museum in Bremen, until it was destroyed by a British bombing raid in 1942. Leutze created a full-size replica of the painting shortly after completing the original. It was placed on exhibition in New York in October 1851, and it was highly acclaimed. At that time, images and tales of George Washington were ubiquitous in America. On the 50th anniversary of his death, the first president had become a nearly mythological figure, and Leutze's topical, nostalgic painting was a sensation akin to a modern-day blockbuster. Owned by the Metropolitan Museum of Art since 1897, the painting has been restored and now serves as the centerpiece of its American wing. Its newly reconstructed frame is crowned by an American eagle, with a ribbon beneath quoting the cavalry officer Henry Lee, who said about Washington in 1799, "First in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen." The political implications of the painting were apparent in Leutze's circle in Germany. But in America, these illusions were overshadowed, and the painting was acclaimed primarily as an effective expression of a pivotal event in the nation's history.